This is going to be a brief recording. Look at the whole idea of approaching studying AC548. So we look at some tips on how to come up with an overall study plan for semester 1. So some of the common issues, particularly at the start of the MBA program, can revolve around if you haven't studied in years, you may have forgotten how to study, you may need to relearn that whole process. You really just don't know where to start and you're kind of a bit overwhelmed. So again, we're trying to put a structure in place in a step-by-step process. You have a lot to balance between work, studying, other commitments with the family, and so you want to make the most of your time. So you want to be efficient. So we'll see, well, what am I supposed to do after the lecture? How do I make sure I get the most out of the lecture when you're there? And finally, another common issue for students is that you're a bit apprehensive. So you think, this may be my weakest subject, I'm not good with the numbers, and therefore you want to make a good start to study. So you want to be as good intentions and get off to a good footing. So when we look at all through those areas, when we look at the whole idea of coming up with a study plan and some of the kind of tips that students seem to have benefited from over the previous years. So ultimately, in terms of getting a good structure to your study for AC548 and for your other modules in general, there's 3 key pillars. Now I will caveat that studying is somewhat of a personal process in that something works for one person may not always work for every student. So some people like quiet places, other people like background noise. Some people prefer to do it in the morning, some people prefer it in the evening, some people prefer to work in a busy library, other people prefer to work in a closed room where they're secluded from everyone. So it is personal preference, but will I give you some key ideas to think about when you're thinking about what works for you. Well, the key pillars are get organised, start a routine early in semester, and study in steps. So take it step by step and build on it week by week. So we'll take a look at each of those then in turn. The first one is obviously enough get organised. And there's 3 main steps here. Before the lecture, what you need to do, during it to get the most out of it, and then after the lecture in terms of to recap and to consolidate your knowledge. So before the lecture, ideally, I think students need to read ahead. It's not that you have to read everything, but if you printed the notes in the question pack, you have a quick look at, well, what are we going to cover this week? Where does that fit into the overall module mind map we covered in week 1? And how might that relate back to the stuff we've covered last week? So again, there will always be, if you're informed what we're going to cover in class, it makes it easier to pick up things as you go through. It may not always be feasible, but can be very beneficial. And then just consider, do you have any questions to ask me at the start of class? I'll always be there a bit early and on the break. So from your work from the prior week, jot down some questions that you're not sure of. And if you haven't emailed me already, just come up. Then during the lecture, if you have read ahead and you have printed the notes, you have to take notes yourself. This is for you when you go back over to say, the lecturer said this point, or the lecturer said to look up this particular example or this particular topic. So just highlight for yourself, what do I need to go back over? So I might have explained something in class and that didn't click exactly. So you say, need to go back over that. So again, you're highlighting, you're using different color biros. And the most important thing at the end of the lecture is write a to-do list. I'll tell you what to do at the end and as I go through the lecture. But at the end, before you leave the room, write down, this is what I need to do for AC548 before the next day. So it just makes it when it's fresh in your mind and you're not putting it off. And then ideally, within the next 2 or 3 days, you need to look at the recap email that I sent around and review the topics we covered in class. The earlier you do the recap, the earlier you come back to accounting AC548, the easier it is. The longer you leave that recap, it's very hard to get back into it and you'll be starting from scratch again. So review the key topics, look at the textbook, look at the recap email, and if there's any questions to do, make sure you make an attempt at them. So nice and structured. So in terms of getting organised, get your AC548 folder and bring to class. So at the front of that, you'll have your mind map, you'll have your schedule of classes, and then each week you'll add your notes to that, your questions, and your own handwritten notes from class and from your own studies. And gradually it'll build on week till you have a very good folder at the end of it. Know what you need for each class is very self-explanatory. You'll need a calculator, make sure you have the notes and questions, and ideally bring your folder as well. Plan around the key dates means know when the lectures are on. We don't have any lectures 1 week in the semester, and know what that timetable is. So when is the CA due, continuous assessment, and plan around those dates, particularly if you have other commitments, you may be missing a week. Know which week you're missing, nominate someone to take notes for you, or have a conversation with them the following day, just so you can get up to speed what I said in class. And I suppose the final thing then, that's moving us on to point 2, is start a routine. The earlier you get into a routine in the semester, the easier it becomes to start your study. So for that routine, I'm a big fan of this thing called an accounting hour. Or you may need a counting hour by 2 or by 3, depending on the time you want to dedicate it. So at a certain time every week, you'll follow up on the material from class, you'll review the harder concepts you need to go back over, and you'll complete questions and get ready for next week. So you might have 2 accounting hours, one to recap on last week, and then maybe an accounting hour on the Tuesday evening or the Wednesday evening, where you get ready for next week, you print your notes, and you just do a quick read ahead, what we're going to cover, and any questions from me. That's entirely personal preference, so what suits you. Some students in the past have done a Sunday morning. Some people do it late at night when kids are gone to bed. Other people prefer to do it at lunchtime at work. It's whatever suits you, but the key thing is to make it work. If you are not disciplined and don't allocate that routine early on in the semester, it's going to be a big struggle. And the last point there, it needs to be little and often here. You cannot do a big cram at the end. It's going to make your Christmas and your January very unenjoyable if you're leaving a lot of it until that period is trying to cover. And the final one then is the study in steps. So for some people where this is a new topic, a completely new area, there'll be a very steep learning curve. You are learning a new language and new terms, but immerse yourself early. If you're learning a new language, you get into it and you constantly keep reading. So my advice would be get 2 or 3 different textbooks from the library. Read the same chapter for 2 or 3 different perspectives. You'd be amazed the amount of different things you'll pick up because textbooks write it differently, they use different examples. So my general process is, how should I approach study is an often question. First step is, once you go back, review the slides. And hopefully you've handwritten notes in the slides, talking about examples I would have talked through in class. That'll lead you on to pick a chapter in a textbook. Some textbooks, some students like the way they're written, other students prefer a different style. So have a read of a couple. Take an hour, go to the library someday. If you're having struggle with the library, ask me and I'll show you how to find the books. Then, once you're comfortable enough with the concept, try some starter questions, which are typically the earlier questions in the pack. And once you're confident with them, try some longer questions that have walkthroughs. So the screencast of an online recording to see how you get on. So this thing about studying and accounting, it has to be step by step. If you jump into exam questions straight away, you're going to get frustrated and you're going to be demotivated. And the key thing is that line at the bottom. Once you understand the concept of the topic we're covered about, that's the big focus of why you should come to class for the 2 hours. I'll explain the topic, explain the concept of why it's important, and then you'll go off and you'll apply that to the numbers. We'll do some numbers in class, but a lot of that will be you attempting questions and looking at the video walkthroughs I have in your own time. Could be early morning, could be late evening, anytime. It's readily available on YouTube. It's just a matter of you making the time in your own schedule to practice all those questions. So take it step by step, but do not jump in too quick, too early. So in terms of a key takeaways, just a brief 10-minute idea or video of what the key tips for studying. First one is to create a study plan between now and the end of the semester. So you're talking around 12 weeks. You need to map out high level, what are the key dates? So when do I have lectures? When do you have your own commitments? You might have a holiday, you might have family events, or you might have work events. But then you need to start getting down to committing, right, I'm going to commit a day and a half, or I'm going to commit 3 hours that day, that week, 4 hours that day. So hours per week, so you know exactly at a high level, here's where my main weeks of study have to be, because the other weeks are taken up with various commitments, work, family, etc. And once you know how much you can commit each week, start creating smaller goals at the start of every week. What do you want to cover of each module? So for week 2 of accounting, you wanted to recap on week 1, you wanted to print the notes off for week 2, and you may have read the paper that we assigned in class. You use your recap email each week to set the goals for next week. But you have to have point 1 is the study plan, is the broader week by week, how much time can I give based on my commitments, so like a mini calendar. The second one about the smaller goals is they're specific to each module. What do I need to get done this week? Smaller goals, smaller milestones, and tick them off. And then the other 2 points are more practical ones. Talk to your MBA 2s. They came through the exact same process last year. Ask them how they tackled it. Talk to people who are in the same situation as you, whether they're experienced enough at accounting or whether they're completely new to it. Find out what they worked for them, what didn't. And remember, you're not the first, so use the people who've gone before you and you won't be the last, because you will be in that position next year, hopefully giving advice to the MBA ones who start in 12 months' time. Right, so see it as a network, see it as a group of people who are there to share knowledge. And finally then, user groups. Some students are every year to form accounting study groups where they'll attempt questions and then correct them together. Or what they might do is they go through a topic and they'll say, actually, I found a very good textbook, and they'll share notes, they'll share textbooks that they found useful. Or what they might do is if one person is missing in a group because they miss a lecture, they'll take notes and they'll reciprocate that favor again a different week. So use your groups more for just assignments, but as study groups as well. And again, the two key things to remember, particularly at the start when it can seem overwhelming, when you're saying, how am I ever going to get through 2 years? How am I ever going to get through a particular module? If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And my big advice every year is put that on a post-it wherever you study and put it on your folder. Right? You're here, you're signed up for the MBA for a particular reason. And we hopefully explain to you in week 1 why accounting is part of that MBA. It won't be easy, but if it was, everyone would be doing it and it had no value. So it is a bit of effort, but the effort will be rewarding at the end. And finally, if you're struggling in a particular area, you're not sure what that means or what topic or how a question was actually approached, ask. That's my role. Don't be afraid to send me an email or come up before or after class. So hopefully you found that short video useful. Again, it's important to see this at the start of semester to make a very good start to your study. The more routine, the more disciplined you are early on, it'll make it very manageable when you get into the Christmas period and studying for your January exams.